India and Pakistan. These two rival South Asian states have been at war 4 times since their independence from the United Kingdom in 1947, and both possess nuclear weapons. Tensions regularly rise between these two neighbors, and it's essential to understand the origins of this rivalry. Religious and territorial conflicts, access to water resources. Is war between India and Pakistan inevitable? India, 3,287,263 kilometers squared, 1,400,000,000 inhabitants, and Pakistan, 881,913 square kilometers and 221 million inhabitants. Both gained independence from the United Kingdom in 1947. Before that, they were part of British India. In the Indian Empire, the British directly controlled some territories, while others were princely states, ruled by an Indian prince, but under British suzerainty. There were several hundreds of these, many of them very modest, barely 10 square kilometers in size, and in reality, they were ruled de facto by the British, the rulers having only symbolic authority. But this was not the case for others, such as the great princely states of Hyderabad, Mysore, Baroda, and Jammu and Kashmir. And at the time of independence in 1947, India was divided into several states to separate the Hindu and Muslim populations. The states of India and Pakistan were then created, with Pakistan at that time including West Pakistan and East Pakistan, the future Bangladesh, within the same state. This partition led to huge population movements. Many Muslims left Indian territory for West or East Pakistan, and vice versa, many Hindus left Pakistani territory for India. An estimated 10 to 15 million people were displaced. There was also intercommunal violence, with estimates of the death toll ranging from several 100,000 to 1 million. It was a real tragedy that would shape relations between the two countries for decades to come. At the time of the partition of India, the princely states had the choice of joining either India or Pakistan, or remaining independent. The Maharaja, and therefore ruler, of Jammu and Kashmir, Hari Singh, was Hindu, but the majority of the population of the princely state was Muslim. He thus chose independence, a sort of middle way, but he had to contend with Muslim rebellions, particularly in Poonch and Mirpur, and above all incursions by Pashtun militias, an ethnic group with a Muslim majority living in Pakistan and Afghanistan, who was supported by Pakistan with the aim of seizing the princely state so that it could become part of Pakistan. Against this backdrop, the Maharaja decided to ask the Indian army for help in exchange for Jammu and Kashmir becoming part of India. The Indian army intervened, as did the regular Pakistani army, and thus began the First Indo-Pakistani War in Jammu and Kashmir. It lasted just over a year between 1947 and 1948, and finally, a ceasefire was proposed by the United Nations and accepted by both sides. Jammu and Kashmir was divided, with India taking control of the eastern part and Pakistan the western part. As you could see, certain mountainous areas came under Chinese control. Just under 20 years later, Pakistan again tried to infiltrate Indian Kashmir to create uprisings among the Muslim population. The maneuver was quickly spotted, and the two states embarked on a war that lasted just over a month and a half in 1965. The ceasefire treaty that followed left the borders unchanged as you see them on the map. This was the second war between the two new states. Remember that at that time, Pakistan was divided in two, West Pakistan and East Pakistan. Decisions were taken in West Pakistan, while East Pakistan, which accounts for more than half of the population, felt neglected and independence movements were springing up. In particular, they criticized the government for allocating only a small budget to the region's development. In addition, at the end of 1970, East Pakistan was hit by the Bola cyclone, which killed between 250 and 500,000 people. The following emergency management was judged disastrous, increasing resentment towards the Pakistani government. Also, in 1970, a pro-independence party, the Awami League, won 162 of the 300 seats in the general elections, but the party's president was arrested and the party was banned. All these factors led to the start of hostilities between the independence fighters, who wanted the two Pakistanis to separate, and the army in March 1971. This marked the start of a civil war in Pakistan, in which India initially provided no military support, although it did mass its troops on the border and took in millions of Bengali refugees. It finally took part in the conflict, but months later, in December, in support of the Independentists. So we have a third war between Pakistan and India. This time it had nothing to do with Kashmir, but it led to the independence of Bangladesh, and Pakistan lost half of its population. It was the third war between the two states, and a great defeat for Pakistan. It should be noted that since the end of the 60s for India and the beginning of the 70s for Pakistan, the two neighbors have both begun a military nuclear program. So today, they're among the states with nuclear weapons. This will add a new dimension to future tensions. A new confrontation took place in 1999. Indian soldiers stationed in the mountains around the town of Kargil were on their usual winter rotation, and the outposts remained unmanned for some time. Pakistani soldiers took advantage of this to seize them, with the ultimate aim of blocking Kargil, a strategic crossing point in the region. The Indians then retook these outposts by force of arms in the Fourth War, which lasted less than 3 months and ended with India reoccupying all the outposts. Then, in 2001 to 2002, came perhaps the most worrying moment of tension between the two states. Although there was no significant fighting, on the 13th of December 2001, the Indian parliament was attacked by 5 terrorists who killed 9 people before being shot dead by Indian security forces. The terrorist attack was condemned by many countries, including Pakistan, while India accused Pakistan of instigating the attack and stated that the terrorists killed were members of groups based in and supported by Pakistan. Tensions rose, and the two countries massed several 100,000 men and equipment on their borders, ready for a major confrontation. In January 2002, some 500,000 Indian troops were mobilized in Kashmir against 300,000 Pakistani troops. The first Indian artillery shells were fired, and the country planned an offensive for the 14th of January. But on the 12th, under pressure from his American ally, Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf made a speech in which he condemned the terrorist attack on the Indian parliament, declaring that the conflict in Kashmir should be resolved through dialogue and banned several terrorist organizations based on Pakistani soil. Tensions eased somewhat, but on the 14th of May of that year, a suicide bomber attacked the Kaluchik military camp, which housed the families of Indian soldiers stationed in Kashmir. India accused Pakistan of reneging on the promises it had made in its speech on the 12th of January, and of being unable or unwilling to deal with terrorist groups on its soil. It decided to respond militarily, and once again, troops from both countries massed on the border. There have been skirmishes and artillery exchanges. India says it will not use nuclear weapons first, but Pakistan says it will not hesitate to use them if necessary. The United States, United Kingdom, Russia, and Japan tried to mediate, and the situation finally calmed down in October of 2002. As you could see, these episodes in 2001 and 2002 are important because they almost led to a massive war between two neighboring nuclear powers, and they were triggered by a small, highly targeted action by activists and terrorists based in Pakistan. This is something that will remain a very sensitive issue in relations between the two countries. The fact that India accuses Pakistan of tolerating or even supporting these terrorist groups that carry out actions in Indian Kashmir or even more widely throughout Indian territory. Following these events, it became clear that there was a need to create opportunities for dialogue between the two countries. In 2004, the composite dialogue process was established to resolve issues between the two states through dialogue. The main issues were divided into 8 major themes and assigned to officials and experts to try to find solutions. These include Kashmir, terrorism, and trade and economic cooperation. Tensions are lower than in the past, but India still accuses Pakistan of being ambiguous about its relationship with terrorist groups. In 2016, a terrorist group attacked an Indian base, killing 19 people. India retaliated by striking the terrorist group on Pakistani territory. And again in 2019, on the 14th of February, an Indian paramilitary convoy was hit by a suicide bomber in Pulwama, killing 40 people. In response, India again hit the Balakot training camp of the terrorist group, to which the attacker belonged on Pakistani territory. In short, India-Pakistan relations have seen 4 wars, the last in 1999. And since then, it's been punctuated by skirmishes of varying intensity, almost always over Kashmir and including Pakistani terrorism. Several ceasefires have been declared since relations began, the most recent in 2021. It's extremely fragile because, as we've seen, small incidents on the border can lead to moments of great tension. But it has the merit of existing, and it should be noted that there have been no significant incidents since it was established. But as we now know, an act of terrorism, of which there have been many, can inflame things very quickly. As for Indian-controlled Kashmir, to increase its demographic weight and thus reduce the Muslim presence in the region, India is pushing for the immigration of non-Muslim populations into the territory. This is a well-known method used by China, for example, against Muslim Uyghurs or Tibetans. Another important development is that on the 5th of August 2019, India withdrew Jammu and Kashmir's autonomous status and sent 35,000 troops to the region in anticipation of any uprising at the time of this decision. The former province was divided into two regions that became territories of the Indian Union, one still called Jammu and Kashmir, the other Ladakh. This is also a way for India to show that it has complete control over these provinces. So you might ask, why are these two countries fighting so much over Kashmir? Today, we have a de facto border, albeit one that's regularly violated by incursions, but we could leave it at that. In fact, the issue of Kashmir goes far beyond simple ethnic or religious considerations. This mountainous region is actually home to numerous water sources that irrigate the entire Indus Valley in Pakistan. In 1960, India and Pakistan signed the Indus Waters Treaty under the mediation of the United Nations. The treaty gave Pakistan 80% of the flow of the Indus Basin and India 20%. Pakistan has rights to three rivers, the Indus, the Jhelum, and the Chenab, but all three flow through Indian territory first. India has rights over the others, the Ravi, the Sutlej, and the Beas. However, India has the right to use the flow of the rivers allocated to Pakistan, but not for consumption, and in a regulated manner for irrigation and hydropower. Pakistan, for its part, is under water stress. As its population has grown rapidly, the amount of water available per capita has fallen sharply, from 5,000 cubic meters per capita in 1951 to an estimated 800 cubic meters in 2025. What's more, simulations show that climate change will disrupt the flow of water in the Indus Basin. The annual amount of water will remain the same, but it'll be disrupted more unevenly. The intensity of rainfall will increase, and while studies show that the glaciers feeding the three rivers managed by Pakistan will remain stable, those feeding the rivers managed by India will retreat. The melting of these glaciers will make the flow of the rivers affected much more seasonal, exacerbating the uneven distribution of water resources over the year. Kashmir is therefore absolutely strategic and vital, especially for Pakistan, because a large part of the water in the Indus Basin comes from there. Pakistan's fear is that India will use water as a lever to exert pressure on it. This will be made all the easier by the unequal distribution caused by climate change. It should be noted, however, that India already allows very little water to flow through the three eastern rivers for which it's responsible. The only way to exert pressure would be to build reservoirs and dams for the three western rivers, in violation of the 1960 treaty. In the aftermath of the terrorist attacks of 2016 and 2019, which we've already mentioned, India's threatened to use water as a means of exerting pressure. And India fears that Pakistan will use events caused by climate change to accuse India of using water as a weapon, thereby damaging its international image. India is obviously not going to cut off the water completely, but by adjusting water flows, it would be able to destabilize Pakistan, which depends on the Indus Basin for 80% of its agriculture. In fact, Pakistan's water resources are already poorly managed. 29% of the water used comes from groundwater and 71% from surface water. However, groundwater is being overexploited, leading to an increase in soil salinity, which is affecting agriculture. 4.5 million hectares are salinized, half of it in the Indus Basin. Pakistan also currently has very little water storage capacity. Pakistan stores 150 cubic meters per capita per year, or only 30 days of consumption. The only two reservoirs, at Tarbala and Mangla, are also suffering from silting, causing them to lose between 20 and 32% of their storage capacity due to sediment buildup. In addition, Pakistan needs to allow a significant flow of water through the Indus Basin and out to sea to maintain coastal fishing and to prevent salt water from rising from the sea and salinating coastal land. There's also problems of water sharing between the different provinces in Pakistan. In 1991, a water sharing agreement was signed between these provinces. This worked well for about 10 years, but as soon as the first difficulties arose, there was friction between these provinces. For example, Sindh accused Punjab of not releasing enough water, and Baluchistan accused Sindh of doing the same. The map shows the amount of water allocated to each province each year, and when there's a shortage, they're supposed to reduce their consumption fairly and proportionately, except for Baluchistan and KPK, which were exempted from this obligation in 2003. So when there's a shortage of water, Punjab and Sindh, which are the biggest consumers, have to take full responsibility. And this is something they denounce and criticize. What's more, KPK and Baluchistan often get more water than they need, and they don't have sophisticated irrigation networks. They're therefore criticized for wasting water, while Punjab and Sindh have great needs. Punjab also complains that it receives about the same amount of water as Sindh, even though it has more than twice the area under cultivation. Well, I focused on water management in Pakistan so that you could see how strategic this resource is for the country and how India can use it to destabilize its neighbor. Hence Pakistan's desire to control Kashmir apart from any religious or ethnic considerations. So even if a ceasefire is in place, we can expect new skirmishes between the two countries, like those that characterized their relations for much of the early 21st century, in the hope that they can manage to avoid escalation. That's all for today. Thanks so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please let me know by liking or commenting. This will help promote it on YouTube. Also, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel. This is the English version of a French YouTube channel, and I still have a lot of videos to translate. As for me, I'll see you next time for a new video. Bye!